to Channel 1 and this is Good Morning Kenya. As we had alluded to earlier, we want to talk about the issues, to interrogate the causes and necessary response measures, to just put in place to stem this issue that you're dealing with, is that the issue of teenage pregnancy. Now, according to the National Council on Population and Development, is that 2 out of every 5 teenagers in Kenya are either young mothers or are pregnant since Kenya confirmed its first case of COVID-19. That is in the month of March. Now, and this is expected, these numbers are expected to grow since children are going to be home up until, next year. Joining me in this for this conversation is Dominic Kimaita, to just help us just understand then what we can do to ensure that we arrest this situation. Dominic Kimaita, good morning and thank you for your time.
Good morning. It's actually Robert Kiseda.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much for having me.
Robert Kiseda. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming on board and just to help us understand this situation and what we can do in light of this current situation that we find ourselves as a country. From where you sit, why do you think we have this increase of numbers, of teenage pregnancies during this time?
First of all, there are key issues that have played into the situation. The first one is, of course, the closure of schools and stay-at-home order. What that basically means is that most students are now at home, and because they are at home, there has been a surge in sexual activities that leads to issues around teenage pregnancy. However, we must also be careful not to label this as a COVID-19 issue, because whereas COVID-19 has exacerbated the situation, issues of teenage pregnancy and child marriage have been expanding over in the last period of years. If you look at the data from the Ministry of Health, for example, from 2015 to now, we have seen that there has been exponential increase in number of teenage pregnancies. So whereas COVID-19 has indeed exacerbated and revealed the situation, teenage pregnancies have been here with us, but as a society, we have not been feeling free to talk about some of these difficult conversations and issues.
Very well said. Now, with this current situation that we find ourselves in, then what role can stakeholders play to just tackle this issue of teenage pregnancies? And when I talk about stakeholders, I'm looking at, parents are going to be with these children for the next 6 months or so as government, works on its school calendar, at this time when we're stemming the spread of COVID-19. What active role can stakeholders, parents, teachers, as well as the community play to tackle the issue of teenage pregnancies?
One of the most critical interventions is on sexuality education. And if you look at the Ministry of Health model that they have given on sexuality education can be provided at home with parents, it can be provided at community level, it can be provided at facility level, and can also be provided at school level. And now that schools are closed, it is very, very important that parents are able to have honest conversations with children about issues of sex and sexuality. If you look at most home setups, is that these are very difficult conversations that parents are not willing and able to have with their children. They have sort of left this role to the teachers, and now that children are at home, it has become now even more increasingly important for parents to have conversations on sex and sexuality, for parents to be able to have honest and free dialogue, because when children and young people have access to information, then they are able to make informed choices on their sexuality. The other thing that is important is also on the issue of child protection. We have seen a surge of, especially now looking at socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds, where girls, for example, who are coming from poor homes have to resort to, for example, having sex for border rides, having sex for pads, having sex for meals, having sex for some phones or tokens. And it's also important that security agencies, local administration, and communities are able to come together and also hold perpetrators of these human violations responsible for their actions.
This issue, the debate of talking about talking about sexuality opening has been quite, a debate of sorts with religious sects, that there's no need, especially to have, these introduced in the curriculum. From where you sit then, when you talk about the issues of, at what age, is it the right time to have, matters of sexuality introduced, in our school curriculum?
The first thing is that if you look at Ministry of Health data, it reveals that girls and boys are starting to engage in sex at a very young age. Almost 50% of boys and girls have had sex by the time they are 17. If you look at a further 20% have had sex by the time they are 15. So the issue is young people are already having sex, and that is the truth of the situation. So as a society, as parents, why then should we hide our head in the sand? Why should we be able to talk to them about these issues even before they start having sex? Because, for example, for a lot of girls, the first boys and girls actually, the first time they engage in sex, there's always the risk of teenage pregnancies, there's the risk of STIs, there's the risk of HIV. So why then would we wait for them to have sex first before having this honest and candid conversation with them? And that is why it's important that um, young people and adolescents are able to have this sexuality education. The most important thing to note is that this sexuality education needs to be age appropriate. Of course, there is information that a 5-year-old, for example, can be able to get. There's information that a 10-year-old should be able to get. There's information that a 15-year-old should be able to get, because as they evolve, they require different kinds of information. So, for example, information like body parts, for example. If you look at children, for example, as young as 6 and 7, there's this childhood games, for example, that they call either Chababa and Chamama, these childhood games that they play. So it's at that level already, it's important for them to know that these are my body parts and this is how I should be able to protect myself. This can also be able to help young girls and young boys be able to even evade the predators, for example. So, for example, if you say that this person touched me in this kind of place, if they have the right information on what kind of part, for example, they were touched, then that can be able to even help them talk to their parents, talk to their community members, talk to their caregivers about some of the violations, and then that can also help hold perpetrators responsible and accountable.
Other than just barriers, religious barriers, we have issues of tradition and culture. We are still inherently African in culture, and talking about sex has always been frowned upon and thought of as taboo. In the 21st century, then what can parents do? We used to have aunties talking to the young girls, and uncles advising the young boys. But within the social strata as it is, with the urban migration, this is not so. Then would you say that this is also affecting, our discussion, or rather in terms of our knowledge for this, knowledge among these young people about reproductive health and what they can do to just remain responsible?
Yeah, that's true. That's definitely true. And one of the issues that I like that you pointed out to is that in the traditional African families and societies, there's a system that was deliberately set up for young people to be able to have sexuality education. For example, as you mentioned, young girls could sit with their aunties and their grandmas, and they could get this information. Now, because of the societies that we live in that is increasingly urbanized and increasingly nuclear, you find that most of the time it is just either the father, the mother, and the children who are living in sometimes, for example, in urban centers, who are living in some small rooms. So you find the truth is that sometimes you find that if they're living in some small room and the parents are engaging in sex, for example, the children who are there at that place, for example, are getting some kind of information. But then nobody is willing to have the conversation to talk to them. And that is why I think that we need to strengthen all the 4 models of sexuality education. The first one that we have mentioned is the one on the community setup, whereby if you're not free to talk to your child about sex, for example, can your brother, can your auntie, can your uncle, can your grandmother have this conversation? The other one is on the school setup, which is very, very critical because most of the time children are at school. The other one is the facility setup. If a child, for example, has gone for whatever it is that they have got to find at the hospital, will they find someone there who will be able to give them comprehensive information? And the fourth one, and most critical one, especially now, is the virtual-based model, whereby young people can be able to access information through the net. If you look at Google Zeitgeist results, for example, that monitors the kind of information that young people are looking for online, one of the key issues that young people are looking for online, if you look at trends from 2012 up to now, one of the key questions is what is sex? So young people are going on the net to find out what is sex. So that is why it's critical for the government and partners to be able to provide accurate information across all these platforms to enable young people to be able to make informed decisions on their own sexuality.
Now, how has lack, of access to reproductive or rather sexual reproductive services affected or rather exacerbated the issue of teenage pregnancies?
If you look at, according to the WHO, young people require services that are provided in a friendly manner. So friendly manner, it looks at time, for example. Is this time appropriate for young people? Is it provided by the right personnel who are trained? Is it provided in a manner that is acceptable to young people? So if you look at most of the health facilities, for example, that you go to, there is limited confidentiality and privacy. You will go to a hospital, for example, and then you will find some queue. People are there, people that you respect, for example, your aunties, your grandmothers, they're there, and you are all in this line going to antenatal, for example, and it becomes a lot of young people shy away from such situations, so they would rather not access services because the services are not friendly. So currently in Kenya, only 10% of facilities provide comprehensive youth and adolescent-friendly services. So there's a guideline that has been developed by the Ministry of Health to tell healthcare workers how they should be able to provide services that are friendly to adolescents. So if these young people are not able to access these services, then, for example, if they require things like condoms or contraceptives or just information, they would rather just not go at all if they would find, for example, that their auntie is the next person on the line. Then it doesn't make sense for them to go for such a service. So they would rather stay away. And that's why it is important for the Ministry of Health to ensure that they improve the facilities to be able to provide adolescent and youth-friendly services. And this can be able to enable young people to get services that are acceptable to them, services that are provided in the right manner, and most importantly, services that are affordable and also that respects the privacy and confidentiality of adolescents and young people.
Now, the reports that we got, especially from the county, indicate that a total of around 20,828 girls between the age of 14 and 19 have become mothers, while others older between the age of 15 and 19 at 24,106 are pregnant or already mothers. These are worrying statistics. But how prepared are, counties at this point to just handle this issue of teenage pregnancies?
I think for me, the first thing is that we are not having an honest conversation as a country. If we are not having an honest conversation, then we cannot be able to develop appropriate responses. If for some reason people are getting pregnant, girls are getting pregnant, girls, and are getting married, and for some reason we are still believing that adolescent girls and young people are not having sex. So the first thing that we need to do is to have an honest conversation. When we have an honest conversation, then we are able to develop county-specific responses that uphold human rights. So one of the issues that we have seen is that there has indeed been a lot of progress in different counties. I will give you the example of Migori County, for example. Migori County has developed an adolescent and youth multisectoral plan that brings together the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Finance, Planning, all these people together to see, as a county, what do we do going forward. There are other counties as well that have been able to do this. Mombasa, for example, has done the same. Nairobi is just finalizing their plan. So the first thing is, what plans have the county put in place in order to address this kind of issues? And the truth is, different counties have different contexts. I will give you an example of my home county of Homa Bay, for example. And Homa Bay has among the highest teenage pregnancy rates in this county. So if you compare, for example, Homa Bay, and let's say, for example, a county, let's say like Kirinyaga, you will realize that they have different issues, for example. A county like Kajiado may be having more prevalences of FGM, for example, whereas a county like Kisumu may be having more prevalences of HIV/AIDS. And therefore, it is important for counties to have their own plans, which is based on the actual national plan, whereby they will say that for the next 5 years, these are our priorities as a county. We are going to develop this kind of friendly services. We are going to ensure that we set up centers that give information to young people, whatever it is, and whatever it is that is acceptable and contextualized to their local setting.
Talking about what governments can do, both national and at the county level. What are stakeholders for you as the Network for Adolescent and Youth of Africa? What are you doing, to just about the high rise in teenage pregnancy within your capacity?
So one of the key things that we are doing so far is we are conducting media campaigns through social media to be able to inform young people about issues around sex and sexuality. We are also talking to policymakers on issues around developing appropriate legislative and policy frameworks at the county that can be able to support adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights. We are also supporting dialogues with young people themselves, because for us, we believe that it is important for us to support young people to speak about their issues themselves. And so we are having conversations and we're supporting young people to ask their local decision makers what it is that they want at their level. One of the things that we have also just launched is we have launched an anthology on the lived realities of girls in Kajiado. So we went to the communities and we collected stories, and these are real stories of real girls, because there is always this argument whenever you're trying to bring up conversations. People always say that, but we don't know anyone who has teenage pregnancy, for example. So one of the key issues that we are doing is documenting. We are documenting this kind of stories so that we are able to bring them to policymakers and say, hey, we have been using these statistics, but you have been saying that these people do not exist. So these are the faces. These are the faces of the girls. These are the faces of the boys. And this is exactly what we want you to do. So we are trying to bring as much evidence as possible to persuade, inform, and motivate decision makers to take action on adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights.
Mm-hmm. Now, there is a case in the story that the media is cleanly focusing on. A story that is taking place in Baringa, where Baringa teens are trading sex for money to buy sanitary towels. This comes at a time when we are having a rise in gender-based violence, issues of early marriage, especially where teenagers are concerned, and the issue of female genital mutilation. How then do we access justice for these girls?
The first thing that is important is that we need to ensure that we implement the different policies and legislations that we have on these issues. We have, for example, the Sexual Offences Act 2006 that talks about issues of such kinds of violations. We have the Female Genital Mutilation Prohibition Act of 2011. We have the Children's Act. We have the Marriage Act of 2014. So we have legislation that have been put in place to address this kind of issues. The issue now becomes enforcement. And if you look at all these kind of frameworks and policies and legislation that we have, they have an implementation matrix that says that what is the role of the chiefs, for example? What is the role of the police, for example? What is the role of community elders? What is the role of the MCA? What is the role of the governor? And I think the first thing that needs to happen is that we need to hold people accountable to respecting, protecting, and fulfilling adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights. The other key important thing is as a community, because most of these violations happen at the community level. What is the role of the community? Are they speaking about these issues? Are they reporting the people who are responsible for these violations? Or they are keeping it hush-hush and exchanging votes in the process? So we need to hold people accountable at all levels, whether they are families, their parents, whether they are chiefs, they are police, they are national government officials, or county government people. At the end of the day, the first key thing is implementing and enforcing the legislation and the policy framework that we have in Kenya, which talks about these issues in a very detailed manner.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've had female genital mutilation is actually prohibited or rather outlawed in the country, but we'll still see some communities are still continuing to perform this heinous act. Why do you think this is so? Is it that we have lacks in regulation and implementation, or do we have a loophole in the justice system as far as this issue is concerned?
That's indeed very, very true, that whereas FGM has been outlawed and it's been illegal, there are still very many communities that are practicing it. And what we found out when we were doing our documentation on the Stories Zetu anthology, what we found out is that there are parents who are actually giving their girls to be circumcised. So at that level, the first people who are the violators are the parents. So then the other problem is that at the household level, if the parent is the one violating, then these girls have nowhere else to go for justice. So it's very, very important at the community level to, what we have seen is to work with champions and whistleblowers and people who can inform about what is happening, and at least then actions can be taken. We have seen very progressive police officers, very progressive administration officials who are actually enforcing the law the way it should be. But indeed, there's still a very, very big problem of culture and how the culture, particularly the culture of silence on some of these issues. So whereby I may not agree with what you're doing, but then I feel like, oh, you're my uncle, for example, and if I report you, then you'll be taken to jail, or this kind of village dispute resolution mechanisms, whereby after this kind of violations, then people sit down, for example, and the fine is a goat. This kind of things violate human rights, and it's very, very important that then we ask ourselves, what is the role of the law in addressing this kind of grievous offenses?
Mm-hmm. Now, is there a correlation from your research and your survey? Is there a correlation between poverty and, early or rather teenage pregnancies?
Yeah, there's a very big correlation. If you look at the Kenya Demographic Health Survey of 2014, it revealed that particularly girls who are coming from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds or poor households, for example, are twice or thrice more likely to get pregnant while they are children. So that's the first fact. The second fact also, and this is a practical concern that I alluded to earlier, is, for example, if you are the kind of, especially in urban settings, whereby you have parents and children living sort of in the same room, then it means that the parents, for example, do not have privacy and the children don't have privacy. And this kind of leads to a situation whereby girls and boys, for example, observe things from their parents. That is the other thing. Then the other thing also, as you mentioned earlier, is on the issue of, for example, if parents and caregivers are not able to afford things such as pads, for example, then the girls become additionally vulnerable to issues, to predators, for example, who want sex in return for pads, either sex in return for border rides, sex in return for food, and all of this. So indeed, poverty is a critical issue that accentuates, exacerbates, and perpetuates some of these violations.
Before I let you go, and I want to seek your opinion on the way forward in regard to this issue of teenage pregnancies, I'd want to just sample some of the views that we have already gathered on social media. This is at Dennis, that is Mwalimu Dennis Mwina, says, I'm from Riverside, Nairobi. The fact is, if parents or the guardians are yet to talk about it in black and white to their boys and girls, then my friend, installation of that sexual education is nothing. That's the opinion of Dennis Mwima on Twitter. In your own opinion, Robert Aseda, and also your experience working with that particular network, then what can we do going forward to arrest this situation?
Thank you. The first thing that we need to do is, as I said, have an honest conversation about these issues as a country. When we have an honest conversation about whatever issue that it is as a country, then we are able to develop local solutions to our own issues. That is the first thing that we need to do. If we are able to agree that there is indeed evidence that there's a lot of teenage pregnancies in this country, there's a lot of child marriage, there's a lot of unsafe abortions, there's a lot of FGM, then that is the first step. Then the second step is the issue that Kenyans like to ask, that do you know somebody, for example? Do you know? And that is the question that we need to ask ourselves. And the truth is, most families and most people know a lot of girls who have been violated at a young age. It's just that they choose not to talk about it. So we need to see the evidence and follow the evidence where it takes us. The third thing is on the issue of sexuality education. And I agree with what Mwalimu said earlier on Twitter, is that we need to have a sexuality education framework that respects human rights, that is universal and is also based on human rights standards and practices, but at the same time is also able to be contextualized to our own settings. So the first thing is we need to have sexuality education in churches, for example. We need to have sexuality education in schools. We need to have sexuality education in hospitals. We need to have sexuality education in What is the role of churches, for example? Can they have conversations when they are doing their sermons? Can they bring about these issues and create an environment in which the clergy and the girls can be able to have honest conversations about some of these issues? What is the role of the Ministry of Health in this conversation? What is the role of the Ministry of Education in this conversation? What is the role of communities in this conversation? The other thing is we talk about policies, but then if we have these policies and we do not have sufficient budgets that have been allocated to them, then they just become papers gathering dust somewhere. So it's important that we allocate resources. If you look at the Ministry of Health, currently the allocation to health is around 7.5% across over the last 4 years, 7.2, 7.5, thereabout. But then Kenya committed to allocating at least 15% of its budget to health. So if there is no budget that is allocated for some of these critical issues, then these plans that we have become just that, plans. And lastly, and most importantly, it is important to involve adolescents and young people in these conversations. There is always this school of thought that, it's the adults and parents and all this kind of professionals and technocrats who know best. But the people who are living those lives are these adolescents and young people. And how do we bring them into the conversation and ask them, what do you think? They can be able to give us insights, and from those insights, then we can be able to develop appropriate responses that are friendly and, most importantly, are acceptable to them.
Very well. Thank you very much, Robert Asenda, there for your time. That is Robert Asenda, who works with the Network for Adolescent and Youth of Africa. The take home this morning is that we need to have age-appropriate discussions on matters sexuality if we are at all going to address this issue of teenage pregnancies. Some of the statistics that we have gotten here is that the National Council of Population Development says that 2 out of every 5 teenagers in Kenya are either young mothers or are pregnant since the COVID-19 pandemic. However, this is not something that we need to refer to as a COVID-19 issue, as from our guest there, because reports indicate that teenage pregnancies tend to increase during the school holidays than during the school session. A challenge there to various stakeholders, including parents and guardians during this time, as well as the community, is that, issues of teenage pregnancy is that we need to look at children, and they are bringing as a communal responsibility, despite the fact that we are living in the 21st century. Back in the day, as Robert Asenda has mentioned, is that, the young boys had mentors among their uncles to just tell them what it requires of them, or rather what it means to be a boy growing up. Back then, well, the ladies, the young girls, had their aunts and grandmothers to just direct them as to what really it means to be, a young girl and growing to a responsible woman. It's a high time we went back to our roots and culture. And talking about roots and culture, the issue of FGM has been outlawed, but various communities right now are still practicing this heinous act. And maybe it's, from August's opinion, is that it's a high time we also took a keen look into where the loopholes are, and also just more awareness and sensitization as to the impact that FGM has, on the girl who is undergoing the cut, especially in future. That has been our guest, Robert Asenda of the Network for Adolescent and Youth in Africa, trying to address the causes and the necessary measures that we need to put in place to arrest the issue of teenage pregnancies. County statistics between January and May indicated that 4,000 girls aged below 19 years were reported pregnant in Machakos County. And Nakuru County has recorded 1,748 teenage pregnancies, while Kajiado County has recorded 1,523 cases. Kericho, 1,006. Homa Bay, 957, while Garissa is 901. While other counties such as Lamu, Embu, Elgeyo Marakwet each reported about 50 cases of teenage pregnancy. We are already in this situation, and children are going to be home until January 2021. Early indications shows that teenage pregnancies are on the rise during, holidays and not during the school calendar. Now that the children are going to be home up until next year, you and I, as a guardian, need to ensure that we have these candid conversations about matters sexuality, age-appropriate sexuality discussions. This is just one of the recommendations that has been given by various stakeholders who have come on board to tackle the issue of FGM and teen pregnancies that we are currently experiencing. Statistics: 2 out of 5 teenagers in Kenya are either young mothers or are pregnant since the month of March. Well, we take a short, we'll be crossing over to the other side of studio with my colleague Dorina Range as she continues with our interactive segment. I'll be moving away from matters FGM and teenage pregnancy. We're going to be talking about an issue in health. So do keep it right here. We value your feedback, and if my producer can just allow me to just go back and look at the feedback that we have so far received in regard to what we have been airing for you since 7 a.m. this morning. We have a tweet here saying that it is a high time. This is Jasper saying that we need to, adopt measures where we can freely speak about matters sexuality if we are to stem the spread of teenage pregnancy. That is Jasper on Twitter. Further on is the review that engaging teens in sexual education is a positive way to curb early teenage pregnancies. That's a take home from our guest this